Welcome to another inspirational message from Chowdean Community Church, Gateshead. For more information about Chowdean, visit www.chowdean.org.uk. We hope you enjoy the podcast.
Can you hear me, everybody? Yes. Let me ask you a question. Do you ever find yourself in a situation where you are asked a question and your head is saying no, but by the time the answer comes out of your mouth, you are saying yes? Does anybody else have that problem? Often with a happy smile upon your face. This happens to me all the time. I'm hopeless at saying no. Now, it happened to me recently when Heather came and asked me to do this commandment. Heather came up and started telling me all about how they were going to be doing a series on the 10 Commandments, and totally unsuspecting her ulterior motives, I said I thought that was an excellent idea. And just like a fish caught on a hook, she reeled me in further by saying she hadn't actually allocated who would be doing which commandment and asked if I had a preference. Still unsuspecting, I said, well, no, not really. As long as I don't have to do number 7, you shall not commit adultery. And then she hit me with it. Well, actually, that was the one I thought that you would be good at if you could do it. You could bring like a personal perspective to the topic. And there we had it. Head screaming no, and mouth saying, well, I'll think about it. And that good old Christian standby, I'll pray about it. So over the next week, I had a think. And I spoke to James and the children about what they thought. And I was really hoping that they would offer some strong objections and I could escape. But no. Instead, I got a, no, that's okay by us. Oh, and Tim, well, you can normally rely on Tim. He said, well, Mum, you always said that perhaps you'd be able to help others by what you've gone through. Perhaps this is your chance. Thanks, Tim. So here I am. And I have to say I found it quite hard. For those of you who don't know me that well, the reason for Heather thinking I could bring a different perspective to this topic is that I've lived through this firsthand. I was married for 29 years, and unfortunately, this wasn't a happy marriage. During that time, my ex-husband had 4 affairs. This left me feeling worthless, useless, unloved, and with very, very little self-esteem. And those of you who know me really well know that that's something I still struggle with, even now. I also became very unwell, trying to keep up the pretense of a happy family life in front of everyone else, in front of the children and those in the church, until the time came when I could keep it up absolutely no longer. So you could say I've had a bird's eye view of the damage breaking this particular commandment can cause. It's still difficult to talk about even now. It can leave hurtful scars that never completely heal. And they stay with you, making you doubt your very self and who you are for the rest of your life. It makes you question where you've gone wrong and what is wrong with you. Also, as a Christian who's had a failed marriage, it can make you feel like a second-class Christian. And it makes you think that everyone is looking at you and thinking, well, no smoke without fire. What did she do wrong? It's horrible. I did not have a particularly happy marriage, as my husband had quite a volatile temperament, and he could be quite difficult. But I could probably have survived that, but not this as well. It destroys. It rips at your very being, at your very core. So having set the scene as to why I was asked to do this, I thought to myself, where do I go from here? What on earth do I say about this? I certainly don't feel comfortable using the word, S-E-X. My mother is in the second row. So I read extensively, and I also watched the J. John talk on this commandment. To be honest, having seen it, I was strongly tempted to suggest that we just watched his DVD on the subject and then I could sit down. I can't even begin to do justice to the subject in the way he did. But anyway, here I am. What I did know was that I didn't want this talk to be a boring list of do's and don'ts. I wanted to look at the subject in a fresh, new way that would make all of us think, even those of us who are single, widowed, or divorced. And I wanted to make it a positive experience and give every single one of us food for thought. And I thought the best place to start would be with David. Now, I know he's the obvious choice for this subject, but don't switch off. Bear with me. And I wanted us to try and understand one thing about David. David was a man of God. David was a man of God, and he made a whopper of a mistake. One that would stay with him, as it often does, for the rest of his life. And that is something that should put us all on our guard, because I don't know about you, but because he could get it wrong, what about you and me? Now, how do I know that he was a man of God? Well, just look at the Psalms he wrote. He wrote 73 of the 150 Psalms, But I want you to try and do something a little bit different for me today. I want each and every one of you to close your eyes. Close your eyes. And I want you to listen really clearly to something I'm going to read to you. Listen to the words like you've never heard them before. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Now, did you hear that? You can open your eyes now. Did you hear those words? This was somebody who knew and loved God. This was somebody who talked to God, and somebody who walked with God, and somebody who treasured the time that he spent with God. And this person, he'd been like it since he was a small boy. He had wrestled wild animals that threatened to kill the sheep he was looking after as a shepherd. And he had trusted in God the whole time. I'll tell you what, he was not also afraid to stand up for his God. He was outraged when not one of the Israelites in the Israelite army was prepared to stand forward and volunteer to fight the giant Goliath. He couldn't understand it. He couldn't understand why not one man was prepared to defend God's honor. When questioned as to why he thought he could do the job when no one else did, he simply said, "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." And that is exactly what happened. David went out, just a young man, probably a young teenager, against a huge man. The Bible says he was a giant who was experienced in battle, and he won. God guided the single little stone that went into the sling, and it went through the air and hit its target accurately, killing Goliath instantly. That's just one story. There are many more stories of David's courage and honor in the Bible. And he was blessed. I mean, he was really blessed by God as the king of Israel. But, and it's a huge but, then it went wrong. David made a mistake. He was married, and he saw a woman bathing on a rooftop, and he wanted her, and she was married too. He was not satisfied with everything God had given him. He was not satisfied with the family he had, and quite frankly, he wanted more. He made a mistake that would have repercussions in his life forevermore. He abused his power, and to cut a very long story short, he lied, he betrayed, and what he did was ugly, and it was hurtful. He slept with Bathsheba, made her pregnant, and then arranged for the murder of her husband. He made one heck of a mess of things. This was a man of God. In breaking this commandment, he actually, broke many others. He hadn't put God first. He had created an idol for himself, Bathsheba. He had coveted another man's wife. He had lied, and he had stolen her. And that's just to name a few. I mean, he really messed up. It says in the Bible, but the thing David had done displeased the Lord. I think that sentence says it all. This was a man who God had blessed and loved. God was way more than displeased. He was disappointed, and he was hurt by David's actions. David hadn't just hurt the people involved, he had hurt God. Sin hurts and offends God, something we often forget. Did David actually think he could get away with this and think God wouldn't notice? God sees everything, our very thoughts as well as our actions. So what happened? Did David think, oh well, did it make him happy in the end? Well, let's read together. You can follow on the screen behind, and I'd like the reading to come from 2 Samuel 12, verses 1 to 10. The Lord sent Nathan to David. When he came to him, he said, there were 2 men in a certain town, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a very large number of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb he had bought. He raised it, and it grew up with him and his children. It shared his food, drank from his cup, and even slept in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. Now a traveller came to the rich man, but the rich man refrained from taking one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare a meal for the traveller who had come to him. Instead, he took the ewe lamb that belonged to the poor man and prepared it for the one who had come to him. David burned with anger against the man and said to Nathan, as surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die. He must pay for that lamb 4 times over because he did such a thing and had no pity. Then Nathan said to David, you are the man. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I anointed you king over Israel, and I delivered you from the hand of Saul. I gave your master's house to you, and your master's wives into your arms. I gave you all Israel and Judah. And if all this had been too little, I would have given you even more. Why? Why did you despise the word of the Lord by doing what is evil in his sight? You struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword and took his wife to be your own. You killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Now, therefore, the sword will never depart from your house, because you despised me and took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your own. I wonder how David felt. Well, it actually says further on in the chapter, then David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. And I think that's sometimes what we forget. This isn't just a sin against the married partner. It's a sin against God. God, who created marriage, is a blessing and said, therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. In Psalm 51, which was written by David at this time, we get a glimpse. We see a picture of the state of his heart and his mind. He says this, For I know my transgressions, and my sin is always before me. Against you, you only have I sinned, and done what is evil in your sight. He couldn't escape it. It was there all the time, eating at him, gnawing at him. And further on in the psalm, he says this, create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me from your presence or take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. Then I will teach transgressors your ways so that sinners will turn back to you. David was distraught. He had lost that closeness and that peace that we'd felt in Psalm 23. He'd lost the ability to walk with God and talk with God and feel that peace. He craved forgiveness and to wipe the slate clean and to be given a second chance to serve him again. God did forgive him, you know. Nathan told him, the Lord has taken away your sin. But there were sad consequences, one being the death of the child that Bathsheba bore. David was forgiven, but he had to live with what he had done and the real consequences for himself, his family, and ultimately his kingdom. Now, I said at the beginning of this, I didn't want to wave a stick and for it all to be doom and gloom. I wanted it to be positive. Well, do you know what? The first positive thing is God forgives. God forgives. David was forgiven, and we must not sit in judgment on those that make mistakes either. Either this particular mistake or any other one. James 2 says this, for whoever keeps the whole law and yet stumbles at just one point is guilty of breaking all of it. For he who said, you shall not commit adultery, also said, you shall not murder. If you do not commit adultery, but do commit murder, you have become a lawbreaker. Now, when I was preparing this, I was a bit worried about reading too much to you from God's word, but then I thought, no, this is God's word. This is what God has to say. So if you bear with me, I want you to listen to one little bit of reading. And it's what happened when Jesus was faced with this particular sin. And I always remember a sermon that Corinne spoke about, and it stuck with me about this particular reading. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. I mean, they didn't mince their words. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now, what do you say? They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. I wonder what he was writing. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, Let any one of you who is without sin be the first one to throw a stone at her. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away, one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left with the woman standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? No one, sir, she said. Then neither do I condemn you, Jesus declared. Go now and leave your life of sin. Two things struck me about that. I like the bit that says the older ones first. Do you not think that's because they realised just how much they'd messed up their lives, perhaps more so than the younger ones, and they could think of all the bad things they'd done? And I like the bit where it says, go now and leave your life of sin. Jesus wasn't going to condemn her, but he expected her to turn around, repent, and do something about it. He didn't just whitewash the issue. You know, if we sit an exam and the pass mark is 20, you failed. If you then get 18, you failed. If the pass mark was, as I say, was 20, you get 18, you failed. If you get 19, you failed. Whatever the pass mark is, if you just get one under, you failed. We have all failed God's exam of living a holy life. Some have failed it a bit bigger than others, but we've all failed it. And we should not be passing judgment on others, but instead taking a good, hard look at our own lives. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, well, this is all right, I'm not married. Or, well, this would never happen to me. I can switch off and think about Sunday dinner. It says this in Corinthians. So if you think you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. How do you know that one day you might not be married and you might not be attracted or fall in love with someone who is married? How do you know that one day you might be tempted by somebody else? So the good news is there is hope if we do mess things up, but we have to ask forgiveness. But how do we stop this happening before things get messed up? Well, I think we need to think about what is wrong first. Jesus said in Matthew, "But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman or a man lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart." That's a very high standard. Okay, remember what I said about God seeing everything? Anyone here beginning to feel just a tad guilty? Who has looked at something on the TV, lingered on the off button just a bit too long before switching it off? You accidentally do a bit of channel flicking, and you flick onto a channel just showing a bit too much by accident. And of course, as a good Christian, you don't watch the programme, but did you linger just a bit too long before you turned over? Do you enjoy watching the soap operas and the films where adultery and affairs are romanticised and made okay by a good plot line and soft music and good acting? It's not okay. Have you ever looked at something on Facebook or liked something on Facebook or shared something on Facebook that's a picture of your favourite TV character or personality? They're wearing just a little bit less than they should be. How do you think your wife or your husband might feel? Have you ever looked at things on your computer that are rather near the mark? Have you even bothered to block inappropriate content from appearing on your computer or news feed? And have you ever giggled and gossiped with married friends over someone who is rather nice, or laughed at near-the-mark jokes? J. John told the story of a woman and a man who go into a shop, and she is busy looking at clothes like we do. And a very attractive lady comes in and walks past the husband, who turns his head and watches her walk the length of the shop. The wife, without even raising her head from the clothes rail, says, "Was it worth the trouble you are now in?" We joke about it, we make light of it, but it hurts, and it's dangerous. Watch your thoughts, they turn into words. Watch your words, they turn into actions. Watch your actions, they turn into habits. And watch your habits, they turn into character. Listen to that again. Watch your thoughts, they turn into words. Watch your words, they turn into actions. Watch your actions, they turn into habits. And watch your habits, they turn into character. One small thing can lead to another. Look at David and Bathsheba. She shouldn't have been bathing where every hot-blooded male could see her. And quite frankly, he should have turned away the minute he saw her, closed his curtains, put the kettle on, and had 2 chocolate digestives. We need to make sure we guard ourselves against falling into these traps. How do we do that? Well, have a look at the picture behind me, which hopefully is coming. That's a picture of our television set. Now, please ignore the yellow rubber duck in a builder's outfit on the top of the television. That is a whole different story for another occasion. But have a look in the right-hand corner at the bottom. You'll see 3 little monkeys. And the next slide actually shows them a bit bigger. See no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil. And we have that by the television because we think it's the best place to put it as a reminder to us. See no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil. We also need to remember what it says about making our marriages the very best. Then no one will be ever tempted to think about someone else. How do we practically make our marriages the best when we're all flawed people? Well, the first thing is to remember we're very different. I found out that men speak 20,000 words in a day. Women speak 35,000. Now, that may come as absolutely no surprise to you men at all. But joking aside, Leonardo da Vinci said this, and I love this. An arch is comprised of two weaknesses which, when leaning against each other, make a strength. An arch is comprised of two weaknesses which, when leaning against each other, make a strength. I love that analogy of marriage. And you know, we need to be able to say four things. Some of them so simple, but so hard to say. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I don't know. And I need help. If we can say that to each other, it will go such a long way to a happy marriage. And I've got something to say to you husbands too. A little girl came out of Sunday school one day and told her mum she'd been learning about how Eve was made from Adam. She said that God put Adam to sleep one day as he was lonely and then took his brains out and made Eve. Now, obviously, this is not the right version. It was actually a rib from his side, but I quite liked it. But I'd like you to remember this, husbands. Eve was not made out of Adam's head to rule over him, nor out of his feet to be trampled on by him, but out of his side to be equal with him, from under his arm to be protected by him, and from near his heart to be loved by him. It says in Ephesians, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. And as for us wives, we are told to respect our husbands. And I love this verse from Proverbs. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not harm all the days of her life. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not harm all the days of her life. And you know, we all need to remember when we're talking about love what it says in Corinthians. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered, and it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. We have to work at our marriages with love and with compassion. We need to keep the romance alive and do the little things that mean so much, a kind word, a hug, or simply being there for support. It's important to tell each other just how much you love each other every day. Husbands, do you tell your wives that they are beautiful and they mean the world to you? Wives, do you support your husband and build up his confidence? Or do you nag him and moan about what he doesn't do rather than thank him for what he does do? Adultery is horrible, it's sad, and it's a heartbreaking thing. But it can be forgiven. And with God's help is something that we can recover from. Marriages can't always be saved, but there should still be forgiveness. So Paul has asked you to come back up. I like this quote that C.S. Lewis says, "We think forgiveness is such a good idea until we have something to forgive." We should, however, be on our guard to protect ourselves from ever making this mistake and from causing all the pain and the hurt that follows. We should be rooting our lives and our marriages in the rich soil of God's love. We're going to be singing in a minute a song that we sang at our wedding and means so much, but it's such a positive song because it says forget about the past, forget about the mistakes, they're gone. Look to the future and what you can do to serve God. And as for my story, well, God has been very good to me, helping me to start healing the hurt and blessing me. And I now have someone who is loving and good and kind. And if I loved him any more, I think I'd burst. Thank you.
Heard 1,000 stories of what they think you're like, but I've heard the tender whisper of love in the dead of night, and you tell me that you're pleased and I'm never alone. You're a good father. To you are, to you are, to you are. I'm loved by you. It's who I am, it's who I am, it's who I am. I've seen many searching for answers far and wide, but I know we're all searching for answers only you provide, because you know what we need before we say a word. You're a good father. It's who you are, it's who you are, it's who you are. I'm loved by you. It's who I am, it's who I am, it's who I am. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. You are perfect. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. Love so undeniable, I can hardly speak. Peace so unexplainable, I can hardly think as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still into love, love, love. You're a good father. It's who you are, it's who you are, it's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am, it's who I am, it's who I am. You're a good father. It's who you are, it's who you are, it's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am, it's who I am, it's who I am.
This is the end of this message. We hope you enjoyed it. If you want to find out more about our church, please visit www.chowdean.org.uk. And please take a minute to rate our podcast on iTunes.